I think I've long known that there's an organization called DAR, Daughters of the Revolution.
Yep.
But it's only within the last couple of decades that I've been aware of SAR. Tell me, what is the SAR?
Yeah, the SAR is the comparable organization for the men who have patriots who served in the Revolutionary War in any capacity whatsoever. They didn't have to fight in the Revolution. They just had to provide what we call patriotic service. So, for example, if they offered a cow or oxen to pull cannon, or provided some grain for the horses or whatever, then they are eligible to be in the SAR. And so I'm representing the Valcour Battle Chapter, Sons of the American Revolution.
And who are you?
My name is Bud Smith, and this is the third annual presentation of the Declaration of Independence. We try to do it somewhere around the 4th of July, and this year it just happens to fall on the 1st for a Saturday, and so we're very, very excited to present this to the public. We've gotten a lot of feedback in the past from our audience. They enjoyed hearing our speaker, John Kruger. And John is with us again this year, and
so John always does a good job.
Oh yeah, he's great, and he just makes you feel like you're hearing this document for the first time.
Some people will be hearing it for the first time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We've added a couple new features, Calvin, this year. We have the Cumberland Bay Chorus, who are going to be providing some music for us, and we're also going to be at the end of John's reading. We're going to read the names of every one of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence as well. So we're very, very thrilled for that. And the other thing that we really enjoy is having the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts helping us out also. So they'll be posting the colors and leading us in the pledge.
So this is here at the Oval, at the old base Oval on the Plattsburgh former Air Force Base. What would happen if somebody wanted to become an SAR member? What would they have to do? How do they prove that my 888 grandparent gave your horse some grain?
Gave some grain or something, yeah. Well, they could have fought in the Revolution as well, but yeah, there is kind of an involved process. You have to do some genealogy work, and you have to be able to trace a male ancestor back to the Revolution. And as I say, someone who formed patriotic service. In my case, I think it's my fourth great-grandfather. His first name was Johnson, his last name was Smith, and he signed up at the age of 16 years old to fight in the Revolution in the 1st New Hampshire Regiment. And he saw service in a lot of the different battles. He was at Saratoga, he was at Ticonderoga, and my wife did the genealogy and was able to find out that he did serve. And if anyone is interested in pursuing this, they can go to our website. I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact name of the website, but if you just Google Valcour Battle Chapter SAR website, I'm sure you can find it. We also have a Facebook page as well for anyone interested in just seeing some of the other things that we do, because this is not the only event, Calvin, that we have during the course of the year.
Now, I know the DAR is very involved with marking gravestones. Is the SAR involved in any of that?
We do that as well, and we're also involved with the Wreaths Across America. We have a yearly book donation that we give to a public library, a book based on something to do with the Revolution. This year we presented a book to the Peru Public Library. And so we have a lot of activities throughout the year that we're involved with. We'll be at the Battle of Plattsburgh commemoration also, but of course we're representing the Revolutionary War, not the War of 1812.
Right.
Yeah.
Although it's only it's 25, 30 years later, so maybe some people were involved in both, yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah. So we hope that people come and support us. I'm also a member of the Battle of Plattsburgh Commemoration Parade Organizing Committee. And so we've got a great parade lined up this year with a lot of different musical units. So we encourage everybody to come on out and visit us.
Okay, so Valcour, I think sure everybody here in the North Country knows how to spell Valcour, but if they're looking it up, Valcour.
Yeah.
And the Declaration of Independence was signed on July 4th, 1776, and
Yep.
I think a lot of people would think, well, that was it. The country's underway.
Yeah.
But I know, looking right here in New York State, Clinton County was formed on March 7th, 1788, and it wasn't until 3.5 months later, July 26th, 1788, that we ratified the Constitution and became the ninth state in the Union.
Exactly right. And from what I understand, the delegates to the Declaration of Independence Convention from New York State, I'm not really sure that they signed it at the time everybody else did, because they had to get permission from the people in charge of what was then not New York State, but the colony of New York. They had to get permission from the higher ups that, okay, this is a go, we're authorizing you to sign it. So I think there was a little bit of a delay there as well.
You think
Yeah.
they could have texted them and got that permission right away?
Well, or an email, something like that would have worked. But no, it doesn't quite happen that way back in those days. It's also kind of interesting that with the Declaration of Independence this year, as I said, we're going to have audience participation, where the audience is going to we're going to read the names of every one of the signers. And I think if you asked anybody in random on the street, how many people do you know that signed the Declaration? I think everybody comes up with John Hancock, right? He's the one, he wrote the biggest so that the King of England could see it without his spectacles. They probably figured Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. But who are these other 53 people that put their lives and their fortunes on the line? I love the last line of the Declaration. We mutually pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Because they knew that when they signed this, there was no turning back, and they weren't just dipping their toes in the water. This was a treasonous act, and they could be hung for treason or hanged for treason as a result of it.
Yeah, and it took 12 years, a Revolutionary War, before it came to fruition.
Yep, exactly right. They would have lost not only their lives, but their families would have been destitute. They would have lost all of their possessions, I'm sure, and their belongings, and as I say, looked upon as traitors.
Yeah, and the 13 original colonies, I think Vermont became the 14th one, and that wasn't until 1790. So
Yeah.
it wasn't instant potatoes here.
Oh no, and there was a lot of conflict between New York, New Hampshire, and Vermont as to where the boundary's going to be as well.
In the 1790, being from Champlain, I know in the 1790 census, Alberg and Isle of Mont were included in the Champlain census, and the Republic of Vermont included them in the Vermont census.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yes, yeah, I know. There's been all kinds of problems. I think in the War of 1812, there was some issue with getting the Vermont militia over here to Plattsburgh as well. From what I understand, the governor didn't want to send them, but they just said, "We're going anyways." Yeah. Yep.
I'm glad they came.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that's great. Well,
Okay.
thanks very much,
Okay,
Calvin.
thank
That
you,
was
bud.
nice
And-
of you.
and good. Keep up the good work,
Okie
and this will
dokie.
be 3 years from now. It'll be the 250th, so it's going to be a huge
You got it.
celebration.
Big blowout at that time. Yep.
Okay, thank you, bud.
very much.
Thank you. First up will be Craig Russell, Valcour Battle Chapter President. And then will come the Boy and Girl Scouts.
When we get to it,
Pledge of Allegiance will be next. Followed by an invocation. Cumberland Bay Barbershop Chorus, conducted by Diane Brooks, who will sing God Bless America. Introduction of government dignitaries. Reading of the Declaration of Independence and the signers of the Declaration. And a benediction will be the Cumberland Bay Barbershop Chorus again, with America the Beautiful. And we'll have the retiring of the colors by the Scouts, and then the closing remarks from Craig Russell. And of course, Dr. John Kruger will be reading that declaration. Okay, looks like we are about to start. See, Stan Ransom is here too.
We'll get this going. Good morning, and thank you very much for attending this reading of the Declaration of Independence. Getting closer to the 250th anniversary of our declaring independence and the American Revolution. This is a great prelude to get us practice into thinking the 250. The 250 is what it means for us, why we can stand here and sit here today doing what we're doing, honoring those that fought for our initial country. Initially, there were 4 men that were picked on the committee to write the Declaration of Independence. They were Robert Livingston, Roger Sherman, Ben Franklin, and John Adams. Now wait a minute, who's missing? Thomas Jefferson, yes, that's right. He was an afterthought, but it was a political afterthought, and guess who gets all the credit? Thomas Jefferson. So I guess in the long run,
Yeah, I know.
that's how
I
it
know.
goes. Right.
Yeah.
Right? That's right. Okay? That's politics. Why did John Adams pick him? 2 reasons apparently stick out. Number 1, he was from Virginia. You're going to tie in the southern states. Number 2, John Adams says he can write better than me. So there we have why we have the Declaration of Independence as it was redacted by the Second Continental Congress. It wasn't the way Jefferson wrote it. In fact, when they redacted, as a politician, you'd probably be fuming as you put the bill in front and everybody attacks it. And this one got attacked until it finally got redacted into what we read today. We'll start our ceremony with our trooping of the colors by our Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Hand over heart or Scout sign. I pledge allegiance.
We'll have an invocation started by our chaplain, Stan Ransom.
Yes.
Saying a few words, followed by the Cumberland Bay Barbershop Chorus.
Let us bow our heads. Almighty God, we ask thy blessing upon this chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution and our assembled gathering, as our purpose is to promote sound learning and true patriotism and to further all that is good in our community. So we pray that thou wilt strengthen our hands in all our undertakings, that we may serve our nation to thy honor and glory. Amen. Amen.
We have several representatives, Billy Jones, New York State Assembly, Chris Rosenquist, Mayor of Plattsburgh, and Mike Haskins, Supervisor, Town of Plattsburgh. And each one will say a few words prior to the reading of the declaration. Billy?
Sure. Good. Let me go first so they don't steal any of my words. Well, I'm going to keep this brief. I want to thank everyone for showing up to this because this is important. And obviously, we have a big celebration coming up in 3 years, correct? 2026. And this area has a lot of history. This region does. And it's important to tell those stories and let our children, it's great to see the scouts here, and to continue to tell that. Oh, there we go. To continue to tell that story so that they can learn the history of our nation and what our founding fathers did for us, for this great nation that we live in here. It's not just a holiday, the 4th of July and Independence Day. It's more than that. It's telling the story of our great nation. It's not just my daughter's birthday. She's turning 10 this year on the 4th. But it is important that we continue to tell these stories of our nation and our region to let our children know what people before us have done for us. So I want to thank the Sons of the American Revolution for putting this on. Thank you so much for doing this and continuing this tradition. What are we, 3 years now?
This will be the
3
third.
years. And let's continue to do this because of how important it is. So thank you for all being here. And I'll let the mayor come up with, he's got a written speech, so he's going to really overwhelm you. Thank you.
It's actually quite rare that I write something down, so I will too keep it brief. Thank you to the Sons of the American Revolution Valcourt chapter for organizing this. Thank you to Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and my buddy Greg over there. Always got to call you out. Good to see you. Mr. Cashman, Sidleyman Jones.
Thank the barbershoppers. I forgot to thank them.
I'll thank you on behalf of Jones. The Declaration of Independence is the milestone declaration of humanity's pursuit of equality, and it underscores the very fundamental values of freedom and the pursuit of happiness. As American citizens, we are here to remind ourselves what this declaration represents. The most noble of mankind's pursuits of freedom and self-determination. It states clearly and unequivocally that which democracy has enshrined in its mantra. All are created equal, and each of us have the unalienable right to the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. As we gather today to hear this sacred oath, please consider the true meaning of these words and be thankful to the forefathers elected to make a stand for human rights, freedom, and dignity. And remember that we can never forget our task to continue to strive to achieve the perfection that they've envisioned. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Thank you. I don't get an introduction.
Okay, Mike.
Good morning, folks. It's a pleasure to be with you here again for the 3rd year. I want to thank the Sons, the choir, the Scouts, and all of you for being here. How I would like to contextualize this is that the North Country was written into the preface of the American story in every chapter since. And we serve as important footnotes in the American story. It's absolutely critical for each of us to lean into the American story and to be part of the important citizen movement that makes this nation so great. It's not about elected officials. It is about the citizens themselves. It is also about those, such as the great citizen, that leans forward and wears the uniform of this great nation that protects those very freedoms. If you're a veteran, would you please stand for a moment? Please give them a round of applause. Thank you very much. I just want to end by saying that as we advance to the 250th anniversary of this nation, know that pivotal battles in the American story, such as the Battle of Valcour, occurred right in our backyard. From the Battlefield Memorial Gateway project that we're working on in a public-private partnership with the American Legion and other partners, we're going to continue to find ways to activate that story so that generation to generation to generation it is never forgotten. But being here today is the most important part of it. It's leaning in. Thank you for being here, and God bless.
Thank you all for attending and speaking. Thank you. Appreciate that. We have some other, we'll call them elected officials, I guess is the best way of putting it, that aren't going to speak, and I've got a list here. I'd like to recognize Area 1 County Legislature Calvin Castine, that's here. He's also recording this for us for the third time. Town Councilor, if she's here, Barbara Hebert, if you're here. City of Plattsburgh Ward 6 Councilor Jeff Moore, if you were here. I didn't see him. City of Plattsburgh Ward 4 Councilor Jennifer Talon, right there. And I've got one, I recognize, Dick, could you stand up? Town Historian, Town of Plattsburgh. Samantha Williams, Temple Lord House. I have to thank her for the chairs. I went and talked to her yesterday. She says I got to steal some chairs from the barn. They're always willing to help out. The next person, for me, he's hard to introduce because he'll take me to task on everything I say about him if it's wrong. John, to me, is Mr. History. I enjoy history. He keeps on saying I underestimate myself. This man's a published author. He is involved in all backdoor policies as far as the Champlain Valley is concerned. John has been Kent Lord House director, city historian for a time, and of course retired history professor. This man knows his history. He's very thorough. I have to admit that nobody types like he types when he's going to recite the Declaration of Independence. I can read it without glasses. I mean, he's so prepared in what he does. John, I know you're going to kick me later, but come on up. He's going to read the document. Say a few words.
Say a few words. Unlike other people, I'm not going to be brief. I have written remarks, and I will tell you now, I'm honored to be here. This is the third time. Settle in. It's about 19 minutes. What I want to do is take you back as best I can 247 years. And history, remember, is complicated. Craig mentioned some of the things that I'm going to jump into now, but Craig put a different spin on them that I'm going to present. On June 11th, 1776, the Continental Congress appointed a committee of 5 men: Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania, John Adams of Massachusetts, I put Thomas Jefferson of Virginia third, Roger Sherman of Connecticut, and Robert Livingston of New York, to draft a document to announce American independence. The 5 men met later that day or the next in Franklin's quarters, out of deference to the 70-year-old senior statesman who unfortunately was laid up with gout. Adams and Jefferson had different memories of how events unfolded. Adams recalled a discussion about who should draft the document, with Franklin the unspoken favorite based on his international reputation. Franklin expressed reluctance, citing his physical condition and his long-standing refusal to draft any document that would be edited by a committee. Jefferson recalled it was assumed from the start that he would draft the document. How this was agreed to was never made completely clear, but the 33-year-old Virginian worked rapidly with a sure command of his material. It was not his objective to be original, he later explained, only to place before mankind the common sense of the subject. Jefferson completed his draft during the third week of June. He next shared it with Adams and Franklin, who made several alterations. In the initial draft, certain truths were described as sacred and undeniable. Franklin suggested a simpler, stronger, self-evident, a substitution, an improvement that Jefferson willingly accepted. The Committee of Five placed the draft before Congress on June 28th. If you look at the program, that's the scene that's portrayed in John Trumbull's iconic painting that's entitled The Declaration of Independence. Most people who look at that think it portrays the signing ceremony on July 4th. In fact, there was no signing ceremony on July 4th, or any other day for that matter. Events were moving very quickly in the summer of 1776. The first wave of the British invasion fleet, more than 100 ships, carrying General Sir William Howe and 9,000 troops, was sighted off the Long Island coast on the same day Jefferson's draft was submitted to Congress. On July 2nd, 1776, 247 years ago tomorrow, Congress declared American independence by a vote of 12-0, with New York abstaining. Over the next 2 days, as General Howe's army, I don't hold the three of you personally responsible. Over the next 2 days, as General Howe's army landed on Staten Island, delegates made 85 specific changes to Jefferson's draft, deleting or revising slightly more than 20% of the text. At some point in the proceedings, Franklin leaned over to console Jefferson, reminding his young colleague this was the very reason he never wrote anything that would be edited by a committee. There is a broad consensus among historians that the editorial changes made by the delegates in Philadelphia, meeting in a lofty ground floor chamber in the red brick State House, known today as Independence Hall, improved the clarity of Jefferson's draft. As Joseph Ellis has emphasized in The Cause, his recent history of the country's founding, it's very difficult to imagine any legislative body in contemporary America even attempting such a task, much less performing it as well, especially when the country was being invaded by a foreign power. On July 4th, the delegates completed their work and sent the final version of the Declaration to the printer, who placed that date on the top of the published version. There was no signing ceremony that day. Many delegates signed on August 2nd, but there was not a single day when all the delegates stepped up to affix their names to the parchment copy. That parchment copy reads as follows. Action of Congress, July 4th, 1776. the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let the facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation, till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount in payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept amongst us, in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us, in many cases, of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond the seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us, and endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. Here it comes, ladies and gentlemen. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the supreme judge of the world for the vicissitude of our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. 1 minute, 2 paragraphs, and then I would be happy to jump on that. On July 9th, New York made the vote for independence unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen. 30-year-old John Jay drafted the resolution declaring New York's commitment to the cause, adding, "We lament the cruel necessity which has rendered this decision unavoidable." The future first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court was referring to the imminent arrival of Admiral Richard Howe's enormous fleet, sighted on the horizon that day and headed toward a rendezvous with his brother on Staten Island. Revolution was not a new event on the world stage, but the spectacle of a people explaining and justifying their right to throw off their oppressors and establish a new government based on their own authority was without precedent. The Declaration of Independence cleared the way for tackling the challenges of founding a new nation and maintaining it in defiance of Great Britain. Thank you. Carol.
Thank you, John. That was great.
You had a question.
I didn't.
Oh, I thought you were waving. That's why I said in just a minute.
No.
Fine,
I'm just
fine. No, I didn't mean to call you out, then sit back down and I will go right over here by Calvin.
grateful.
Thanks, everybody.
Well done.
Well done.
Excuse me, John, if you can return here, please.
Whoops.
Consider the fact if you had signed this document, you were actually putting your neck in a noose. When things didn't work out, you were in trouble. Which is quite interesting, I thought, though, that New York waited until the British were in the back door before they said, we better do something about it.
We can't even pass a budget on time, so.
Anyway,
Okay.
you're going
Yeah,
as plane.
thanks. Yeah. My name is Bud Smith. I'm with the Sons of the American Revolution. And we thought this year we would do a couple of new things. One of the new things we did was to add the barber shoppers, and we're very, very grateful for their participation in the program. And the other thing that came to mind was, who were these people that signed the Declaration of Independence? I mean, everybody knows, if you ask the person on the street who signed the Declaration, everybody knows John Hancock, right? Wrote it so big that the King of England could read his name without his spectacles. Everybody probably assumes Ben Franklin signed it. Everybody probably assumes Jefferson signed it as well. But there were 53 other signers of the Declaration of Independence. And that's who we would like to recognize at this time. So we have planted some tickets in the audience, and the people who have the tickets are aware that they are part of the audience participation. So the way it's going to work is this. The four of us, Craig, Justin, John, if you guys would come up here, please, and myself, we are going to read the names of the signers from Connecticut. And before we read the last name, we are going to say the word and. And that is the key for whoever is in the audience with the ticket for Delaware. And who might that be? Okay, so right over here. So once you hear and the person's name, then you will call out the colony of Delaware and read their names. And then after Delaware comes, who comes after Delaware? Georgia, okay. And so then Georgia will take the lead and so on and so forth, okay? So we're just sort of winging it here a little bit. We're trying this out to see how it works, and so here we go. So these are the signers of the Declaration of Independence from Connecticut. Just start with the first one, Craig, and we'll go past it.
Roger Sherman.
Samuel Huntington.
William Williams.
And Oliver Walcott.
From Delaware.
Caesar Rodney, George Reed,
And Thomas McKeon.
Georgia, Button Gwinnett, Lemon Hall, and George Walton.
Maryland. Samuel Chase. William Hockham. Charles Farrell O'Connor.
In case you didn't hear, that was Maryland.
Massachusetts.
Neil Adams.
You want a loud voice to come over and help you?
Massachusetts Bay. Samuel Adams.
John Adams. Richard Stockton and John Witherspoon.
Francis Hopkinson, John Hart, and Abraham Clark.
What was that colony?
New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Late to the party like usual. New York, William Floyd,
Philip Livingston.
Francis Lewis, and Lewis Morris.
North Carolina.
William Hooper.
Joseph Hughes.
And John Penn.
Pennsylvania. Robert Morris. Benjamin Rush. Benjamin Franklin. John Morton. George Clymer. James Smith. George Taylor. James Wilson. And George Ross.
Rhode Island, Stephen Hopkins, William Ellery.
South Carolina, Edward Rutledge, Thomas Hayward Jr., Thomas Lynch Jr., and Arthur Middleton.
For Virginia, George Wythe, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, and Carter Braxton.
Thank you very much.
All considered nefarious people at the time. They did put their life on the line. If Stan Ransom would come up and give us a benediction, followed by America the Beautiful, by the Cumberland Bay Chorus. Barbershop
Let us
Chorus.
bow our heads, please. Almighty God, who are the giver of all good gifts and graces, we thank Thee for the natural majesty and beauty of the United States of America. We thank Thee for the men and women who have made our country strong, especially for those whose sacrifices and leadership brought our country through the struggle for independence. Help us to carry proudly the torch of liberty that our forefathers and mothers passed down to us, and enable us to continue the good work they have begun in our land. Amen.
step up to retire the colors. Good job. You know, everybody's raring to get into this weekend. There's a lot going on. But I would be remiss without saying, recognizing and thanking not only the Scouts, but the Scout leaders from the Adirondack District, Twin Rivers Council, Boy Scouts of America, and the Girl Scouts of Northeastern New York. Without their support, this ceremony, declaration reading would only be diminished a great deal. So I thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the summer. I'm sure you're going to camp and so forth. Thank you. For the student of Plattsburgh, which is great. Cumberland Bay Barbershop Chorus. Well, thank you. Again, we seem to get better every year. Kenton Lord House Museum, borrowed chairs. They're always supportive and so forth. Thank you, Sam. Goes without saying, John Kruger.
Great job.
Anybody that's an honored guest that I haven't mentioned because I don't know you, that you haven't been listed, I apologize for that. You always take a risk when you start naming names, but that's the way that goes. Also, steward shops for allowing us support to give something to our scouts for doing what they do. It was really great that they did that. That's another addition. If you're like me, you got things to do. See you at the 2 parades. Be at Rouse's Point next tomorrow, and it'll be at Plattsburgh on Tuesday. Thank you very much, everybody.